The first cosmos, or the first firmament, was the original universe, which existed before the multiverse was a concept. It was eternal and unchanging, but alone. This sentient universe decided to create life, celestial servants. Some of these servants industriously worshipped the first firmament, seeking its approval whenever they created life on their own, which prompted the first firmament to name them aspirants. Others, multicolored rebels, who were as many as the stars themselves, wanted their own creations to evolve and wanted the universe to grow, change, and die. That was seen by the first firmament as madness and sacrilege. War eventually broke out between the multicolored rebels, later known as simply Celestials, and the aspirants for the dominion of all existence. The war greatly diminished both groups. Eventually, the rebellious Celestials resorted in desperation to using powerful weapons to eliminate their opponents, including the aspirant God-Killer armor, which the Celestials used to win the final battle of the war. The Celestial War ultimately ended when the rebel Celestials shattered the first firmament into pieces. The rebellious Celestials detonated their weapons, and hundreds of new universes were split off from the first firmament. The first firmament fled along with the remaining aspirants, and the new universes formed a collective entity that embodied the second cosmos, which was the first multiverse. The first firmament, wounded and weakened, withdrew into the outer reaches of the void to brood and plan revenge. According to a separate account, Nemesis, the only living thing that existed within any and all realities, chose to put an end to itself because of its loneliness. From its ashes rose the multiverse, as well as the 6 infinity gems, the reincarnated form of the being's might. In the second cosmos, Marvel's prime Earth 616 came to be along with the multiverse. The second cosmos aged and had a lifespan. With new realities came infinite possibilities, where each what-if could become its own what-is. Believing that leaving this unchecked would result in instability, the Celestials tasked their servitors, the Omegas, to help maintain it. Desiring to balance creation with destruction, the Celestials gave life to the primordial darkness, creating abominations called exterminators. They eventually grew too powerful for the Celestials to control and turned on them. The Celestials imprisoned the exterminators in one of the newly created universes lest they devour the newly created multiverse itself. Around this time or prior, the Celestials also created the immensely powerful being named Kal-Hora to be a servant for them. The Celestials were also responsible for sending the Infinity Stones to their respective universes. The second cosmos ended prematurely, lasting only for a few millennia because everything was new, including the concept of all death, and its personification was eager to try it. The remnants of the second cosmos would form an unobservable space outside the next multiverses. While the Celestials passed on to the next multiverses, the Omegas continued their work from the outside, thus becoming known as the Beyonders. As part of the renewal cycle after the second cosmos ended, it was replaced by the third cosmos, a second multiverse with its own Earth 616. Having learned the lessons of being and non-being, the third cosmos formed the earliest sparks of narrative. Other than the Celestials, the third cosmos was inhabited by Lifebringer 1, the legendary first hero, and the Anta-All, the great dragon from the underlands beneath infinity. They battled each other and represented existence and nothingness, respectively. The third cosmos was also primitive. Time and distance had minimal meaning, and advanced concepts such as magic and science did not exist yet. Any attempts at using advanced forms of power would draw from Lifebringer 1. The third cosmos received a visit from the defenders of the future seventh cosmos in order to chase down Enclave scientist Carlo Zota, who had used a time travel spell that had the potential to damage the multiverse. Arriving there and witnessing the battle between the Lifebringer 1 and the Anti-All, Zota found himself cornered by the defenders and summoned a force field to keep Defender Red Harpy from ripping him apart. Realizing that the use of both magic and science was weakening Lifebringer 1, Defender Masked Raider phased through Zota's force field and pulled a revolver on him. When the Masked Raider refused to shoot him, Zota seized the revolver and shot his enemy, unmasking him only to see his own future self's face. Connected to eternity, the embodiment of the seventh cosmos, through the mask, Zota realized what he had to do and donned the mask, holding back the Anti-All long enough for the defenders to infuse Lifebringer 1 with the essences of the fourth, fifth, and sixth cosmoses. Still grappling with the Anti-All, Zota allowed himself to be impaled by Lifebringer 1's sword in order to redeem himself. Zota was sent forward in time by the Eternity Mask. Zota was trapped in a time loop as he now had to stop his past self's plans. Following the Anti-All's defeat, its essence was scattered across the multiverse, and the pieces became the various void entities that would emerge later on, including in subsequent multiverses. As part of the renewal cycle, after the third cosmos ended, it was replaced by the fourth cosmos. The fourth cosmos was a primal reality made of patterns and inhabited by archetypal beings who represented the templates and patterns seen in the heroes and villains of the future iterations of the multiverse, recognizably the seventh and eighth cosmos. The archetypes communicated in an abstract-like language. The fourth cosmos was visited by Carlo Zota and the Defenders on their way to the third cosmos. Zota stole the mask of Doctor Doom's archetype, Never Open, and instigated a war between the archetypes of good and the archetypes of evil. Confronted by the Defenders, Zota summoned Galactus' archetype, What Must Be, and attempted to control him using the mask of Never Open. The masked raider used the Eternity Mask to match What Must Be in power and free it from Zota's control, with Zota using Never Open's mask to jump back to the third cosmos. The sentience of the fourth cosmos was known as the Pilgrim, who carried the archetypes into the mystery when the fourth cosmos ended, and was replaced by the fifth cosmos. The Pilgrim then became the Queen of Nevers, who interacted with the current multiverse from outside of it as its embodiment of possibility. The fifth cosmos was the origin of magic and sorcery. Magic was less refined compared to later multiverses, but not less powerful. All fires there were secret, making it a dark cosmos of deep magic, taken by an eternal night. There were magical, carnivorous, worm-like creatures whose blood could be used as portals. Carlo Zota arrived on the fifth cosmos and was enslaved by that cosmos' sorcerer supreme, Moradun, who taught him a variety of things, including magic, but was also abusive and controlling. Zota told Moradun about the future, revealing that Moradun would survive to the sixth cosmos and battle Zota's pursuers, the Defenders of the seventh cosmos, so when they arrived in this cosmos, he was prepared for them. Fearing the potential of the Defenders as a living spell, Moradun tried to enslave them. However, Doctor Strange redirected all of his magic to the Red Harpy, causing her to summon a green door on top of Moradun, thus banishing him from there and thwarting his plan. Doing so caused Zota to be sucked into the fourth cosmos. As part of the renewal cycle, after the fifth cosmos ended, it was replaced by the sixth cosmos. As foretold by Carlo Zota, Moradun survived the end of time and became Omnimax, the Devourer of Worlds. The Devourers are a constant in each cycle, as their hunger is simply a means to an end, a way to compel the Destroyers to gather the harvest and prepare the way for the birth of the next universe from the ashes of the old. They harvest not just the planet and the lives of those who live there, but also their art, their music, their stories, all the things that gave them purpose and beauty and the will to fight until the last breath for the right to live, to breathe, to exist. This determination, this will to survive, becomes a force powerful enough to bend creation toward a desire for new life, until finally, when all has been consumed, leaving only the void, the Destroyer reaches critical mass. The dreams and art and music of 1 trillion hearts unite within him, ready to be birthed anew. They strive within the Destroyer for release, tearing it asunder with their will to live, to once again begin the great journey. That energy hovers in the timeless void, waiting for a single spark to light the fire. After that, the cycle begins again, shaped by all that came before and fueled by the desire to live once more. As a result, each new universe, each new cycle is stronger, better, and nobler than the one before, closer to perfection. An untold number of universes from now, perfection will be achieved, and something amazing will happen, beyond even the wisest to see. All the struggles, all the pain, the joy, the loss, the dreams, the art, the beauty will have been worth it, and it will be beautiful. The sixth cosmos was devoted to science and is said to be where the very concept was invented. One of its Earths resembled the DC universe. On Earth 616, one of its planets was Ta, inhabited by the advanced Ta'ans. Among the Ta'ans were the Scienceers, the closest they had to superheroes. The sixth cosmos received a visit from the Defenders of the future seventh cosmos in order to chase down Carlo Zota, who had used a time travel spell that had the potential to damage the multiverse. When they arrived, Ta was being attacked by Omnimax. The Defenders teamed up with sixth cosmos hero Taia to protect the planet. She took the team home with her to plan their next move. One of the defenders, the Silver Surfer, met Taia's baby son, Galan, and recognized him as the next Cosmos Devourer of Worlds. Realizing Taia was inattentive, the Surfer decided to use the opportunity to teach Galan compassion, hoping it would encourage him to try harder to resist his hunger in the future. The next day, the team went to confront Omnimax directly, and the Surfer ended up fighting Sota, who had become his herald as he was desperate for power. Zota appeared to have the advantage, but the Surfer convinced him to try and steal his power, and then easily depowered him, as his very long life had given him much more experience with their power source than Zota. Fellow defender Dr. Strange and Taia put his magic and her science together to defeat Omnimax, but after doing so, they were all taken further back in time to the 5th cosmos. The exact cause of the 6th cosmos' demise is disputed. One account blames a natural Big Crunch. According to another account, the Imkran crystal, the first planet to form, was the nexus point of the multiverse, and the crystal at its core hosted the White Hot Room, a realm that serves both as the afterlife and a base of operations for the Phoenix, a cosmic entity that perpetuates the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, a flame lit by humans to keep the dark away. Humankind's primal fear of the dark and the tigers that had hunted them in the night created the tiger god, the phoenix's counterpart, while humanity's love created the tiger god's counterpart, the dog god. When the Dweller in Darkness, son of Cthulhu, fractured the Imkran crystal hoping to feast upon the fear that the impending doom would bring to the universe's population, it is said the 6th cosmos ended. Other account blames celestial overpopulation, as in at least one Earth in the multiverse they reproduced by impregnating planets. Another claim is that an abstract entity embodying the cosmos, eternity, the personification of time, created the Galactus seed. It was obtained by Bor, first king of the Asgardians, a race of extra-dimensional beings. He planted the seed to give birth to the next cosmos, also creating the World Tree and the 10 realms. Most recently, it has been blamed on the Black Winter, a cosmic entity that fulfilled a similar purpose to Omnimax on a far larger scale. Rather than simply devouring planets, it consumed entire universes. In all accounts, Ta was one of the last worlds remaining and sent out one last group of explorers, including its would-be last survivor, Galan. Right before the universe's end, Galan was approached by the sentience of the 6th cosmos, who merged its essence with the mortal Galan, giving birth to a new entity who would survive beyond the end of time, Galactus, the Devourer of Worlds. According to a different account, the Black Winter spared Galan and began the process to turn him into Galactus in order to mark him as its herald. Regardless, Galan was sent into the 7th cosmos while gestating his transformation in his spaceship. Between each multiversal cycle is a period of nothingness before the start of the next cycle. Many entities that plagued the next cycle lived in this existential chasm, such as one of the first elder gods, a baby, who played with creating life before being assassinated by the time-traveling Gore. Another such being was Null, who ruled over the void or abyss until the Big Bang triggered the existence of Earth 616. This was caused by several arrivals. Nis, a sorcerer born in the 31st century who desired to control more mystic power, developed a technique to time travel to the dawn of creation where he could become God and create a new reality in his own image. However, upon arriving, he realized his plan to recreate the universe in his image was pitiable, for in attaining his godhood he learned the truth that mankind was the universe's closest approximation of perfection and that he could not improve upon it. He decided to recreate the universe exactly as it was, causing the Big Bang. A time-traveling Mr. Fantastic of the Fantastic Four was concurrently on the scene along with the entity, a scientist who had become a form resembling a living galaxy after touching a fraction of the universe itself in his never-ending quest for why and how the Big Bang had begun creation. The entity soon emitted a tiny spark of light from his own body, speaking, "Let there be light," and becoming the literal spark of the Big Bang he'd been searching for. Also present was Blastar from the distant future, who was sent to the Big Bang by the people of the end of all things so that he could be the first person in the universe to die because he was the worst criminal of their times. Blastar had unstable nuclear rods powering him until he hit critical mass, exploded, and caused the Big Bang. According to a different account, the Big Bang was sparked by the Celestials. According to yet another, the Big Bang occurred when the single perfect object where all potential matter and energy was contained, the Alpha Omega, collided with Galan's spaceship. Mr. Fantastic began to become lost within the new universe, noticing that it seemed to be extremely chaotic and without order. The entity managed to telepathically communicate with him, explaining that he couldn't control the chaotic forces of the universe as he didn't understand the fundamental forces of a universe. He asked for Mr. Fantastic's help, as his knowledge could bring balance to the entity's understanding of truth. Mr. Fantastic opened his mind to the entity, and the universe began to expand as it was sentient and attempting to understand its own existence. The entity continued to grow until he had fully understood himself. In this new multiverse, Earth 616 became the prime reality on which all others were based, with its inhabitants being the template of which variants were echoes. In this new cosmos, the one above all was the highest creative force in known existence, and the source of all there is, was, and ever will be. He created a servant, the living tribunal, to act on his behalf as the supreme authority of the multiverse, while the one above all lived in the house of ideas, or heaven, beyond all time and space. There are many who claim to have been the universe's first race. When the Big Bang's eruption came echoes of energies and consciousness which coalesced into cosmic beings embodying the sentience of the new universe, such as death, eternity, oblivion, infinity, Lord Chaos, and Master Order. Like in the sixth cosmos, the M'Krang crystal was the universe's first planet. A number of opposites to the Phoenix Force were born along with the Big Bang, all arising from the dark cold room, and opposite to the Phoenix Force's white hot room. The first fallen, the male version of the Phoenix Force, in opposition to it, which represented change, the first fallen sought to freeze the universe in time, preventing it from dying and evolving, which he deemed perfection. The adversary, a demonic entity of shadows who sought to destroy the universe so he could recreate it as he wished. He sought to spread the dark cold room throughout the universe, overturning order simply because he wished to. He saw himself as a gamester, as he toyed with the fate of the cosmos out of sheer enjoyment. La Bête Noire, a creature comprised of pure energy which fought the Phoenix Force. It had many names over time, being confused for Beelzebub, Mephistopheles, or Satan before it was given the name La Bête Noire. The Celestials carried on from the sixth cosmos. Their counterpart was the Horde, a hive mind of alien insects that was meant to destroy and were the Celestials' natural predators, but served the one above all the same, or fulcrum as they called it. Each race altered by the Celestials was given 4 tests, called hosts. During the first host, the Celestials selected the dominant race of a given planet and altered their genetic structure. They altered the race into 3 distinct races. The mainline race showed normal attributes until evolution and an outside catalyst created mutation, granting its members a wide array of varying abilities. A superior race dubbed Eternals, who were typically empowered with cosmic energy. A genetically unstable race called Deviants. After thousands of years, the Celestials would return to each planet and grant it a second host. These are marked by wrath and discipline, and in the few cases that have been recorded, involve the Celestials destroying much of what they had created. During the third host, the Celestials prevented interference by outside influences on the growing civilizations on their experimental worlds, typically by confronting each world's gods and threatening to remove their dimensional connection to their worshippers if they interfered. In the fourth host, the Celestials visited the worlds to do a final assessment of whether that world would remain or be wiped out. The Akanti were the first curious sentients, passive beings roaming intergalactic space in pursuit of knowledge, a race with pure souls that harmed no one. The universe's first natural predators were the insectoid brood, spawned by a dark galaxy. They began intergalactic conquest by enslaving the Akanti before building a fearsome empire. The Celestials' creation, the Beyonders, were intended to maintain the multiverse, and they do their work from outside of it. On the side of that, the Celestials selected Null of the Abyss to be the King in Black, a Beyonder counterpart meant to maintain the multiverse from inside. However, Null declared war on the Celestials and all existence instead. Null created a sword of living darkness from his newly cast shadow and decapitated a Celestial, causing the first death in the multiverse. Cast back into the void by the other Celestials, Null used the slain Celestial's severed head as a forge to temper his sword in its cosmic energies, thus forging All Black, the Necrosword. Intent on reclaiming his kingdom of darkness, Null manifested a symbiotic suit of armor from the eldritch darkness he commanded and embarked on a genocidal campaign against the other gods and life itself, becoming a legendary figure of terror for divine beings even billions of years later. Null left his forge, and the Celestial's head would later become the space station Nowhere. Hell-bent on returning the cosmos to the abyss, Null created an artificial planet from the living darkness he controlled to serve as his throne world and base of operations. Experimenting with his ability to manifest life out of darkness itself, Null created the Exelon, but deeming them failed, he dumped them in a place he called the exoteric latitude. Among his early creations were proto-symbiotes such as Mr. E, Shadow Man, Ka, and a horde of dragon monsters. Establishing himself as the divine nexus of the abyssal entity's hive mind, Null sent them forth into the cosmos, using them to conquer countless planets, devour civilizations and pantheons, extinguish stars, and smother entire planets in eldritch darkness. The few gods that Null spared were forcibly drafted into his army, enslaved to his will, and transformed into monsters using the living abyss placed as sentries to guard the worlds he'd conquered. Another first race were the Luminous, who developed incredible technology. The Proemial gods were a group of primordial cosmic beings that emerged out of the chaos of the newborn universe. Initially, they were faceless organisms with no will or awareness. They only existed as caretakers tasked to maintain cosmic consonance, each with a different purpose. They served the living universe, making ready the way for that which follows. Eventually, they evolved awareness and assumed unique forms and identities of their own. Aegis, Lady of all sorrows, Antiphon the Overseer, Brio of life, Diablerie of chaos, and Tenebros of the darkness between. Another alleged first race was the Builders, children of the Enigma Force of the Second Cosmos. The Enigma Force was a god of light that reacted to the appearance of Null, whom it diametrically opposed. For billions of years, the god of light waged a war against its opposite, but realized that bonding to multiple individuals spread its power too thin to stand against the dark. The god of light began selecting a singular host to bond and bestow its power upon, with that host coming to be known as Captain Universe. The Enigma Force was also a tool used by the Beyonders via their concordance engines to help them maintain the universes within the multiverse. It was also connected to the space wall that separated the macroverse and microverse, and further hosts of Captain Universe always came from the latter, adopting a more general role as the protectors of eternity and being avatars of life. The Builders, like the Celestials, seeded life on planets. More specifically, the Builders created systems to control the structure of space and time, and different races to aid them in their mission. There were two types of Builders, the Creators and the Engineers. They cultivated the universe for billions of years, seeding worlds and directing the evolution of civilizations. Among the many systems they created, the Builders made the Gardeners, meant to create life, Abyssi, meant to judge if that life was good, Elves, meant to exterminate species judged bad, and the Curators and Caretakers, meant to watch species judged good. At some point, Null engaged an army of gold-armored gods, empowered by the light in combat, and slaughtered all but one of them. Pursuing the survivor, Null managed to impale him on All Black, but was himself impaled through the head by the enemy god's spear. Null and the dying god crash-landed on a desolate planet, where one of the indigenous inhabitants, Gore, stole the All Black from the incapacitated Null. Despite the setback, Null chose to not hunt the thief down, though he remained aware of Gore. Born surrounded by starvation and loss, Gore had endured the tragic deaths of his parents, wife, and his children, leading him to resent the gods he believed had forsaken him. With the Necrosword, Gore embarked on a relentless crusade, slaughtering gods across the cosmos and accumulating power throughout millennia. After recovering from his injuries over the course of a century, Null began experimenting with his powers and discovered that he could manifest amorphous parasites called symbiotes from the living abyss and bond them to lesser life forms, corrupting life rather than eradicating it. 12 billion years ago, after an individual named Gera from the alien Viscardi species expressed to the celestial Godhead her species' desire to explore beyond their race's current potential, Godhead created an object called the Black Vortex. Gara was the first of the Viscardi to use the Black Vortex and gain enormous power. However, the Vortex's promise of power corrupted the people, and 1 year later, a war among the Viscardi left Gara as the sole survivor of her species. 8 billion years ago, Eternity begat Aeon, an extra-dimensional master of quantum energy who was tasked with appointing protectors of the universe. About 6 billion years ago, the first Fallen, the male version of the Phoenix Force, was summoned by the king of one of the first ever races to come to existence, with the wish for the glory of his people to be forever preserved. The first Fallen did so, at the cost of taking the king as his host and choosing 4 individuals from the race as his Forsaken. The Forsaken were to live in the first Fallen's extra-dimensional realm known as the Singing City, while the planet was left to be immobile for eternity. In the following years, the first Fallen did this to countless other races, taking the Forsaken of their worlds to join his peaceful and mindless community. From the first races created by the Celestials 5.5 billion years ago, their last survivors attained nigh immortality, and, seeing each other as brothers, grouped together as the Elders of the universe. Among them are the Architect, the Astronomer, the Caregiver, the Challenger, the Champion, the Collector, the Contemplator, the Explorer, Father Time, the Gardener, the Grand Master, the In-Betweener, the Judicator, the Obliterator, the Possessor, the Profiteer, the Promoter, the Runner, the Stranger, the Traitor, the Voyager, and 1,000 others. When the Stranger visited a star in order to create a living planet, he caused it to go nova, destroying the twin planets orbiting it. A scientist named Egros started to work on a way to save his race from the impending doom. On the eve of destruction, Egros had his people move to the bunkers he set up at the planet's core to protect them, but things began to go downhill when the sun went nova earlier than expected. With no time left to seal the chambers and assure the survival of his race, Egros was hit by the solar shockwave, merging him with every living thing destroyed by the sun, including his race, turning them into Ego, the living planet. As the last of his race, Ego joined the Elders of the universe. A second living planet known as Alter Ego was also created by the Stranger under unknown circumstances, but he was given to the Collector. The Stranger planned to one day set his 2 creations against each other to see which was the strongest. Ego's creation was also allegedly accompanied by Id, the selfish moon. Over time, Ego came to reside in an area of space which the Rigelians dubbed the Black Galaxy, so called due to the number of Rigelian explorer ships that Ego destroyed. 5 billion years ago, Aeon chose Galakandar to be the first protector of the universe, granting him the quantum bands, unique energy manipulating devices of incredible power which draw energy from the quantum zone, the realm of potential energy from which all actual energy in the universe derives. 4 billion years ago, the Phoenix Force managed to trap Bete Noir inside the still cooling molten core of Earth, which it could only escape via taking a host who could survive its deadly power. The Earth's biosphere sentient life force, known as the Demiurge, seeded the primal Earth with its own life energies, giving birth to the Elder Gods. The Demiurge and the Elder Gods shaped Earth according to the One Above All's design, save for a lone drop of shadow that sprang into being of itself, not of the One Above All. This living globe took the name Vinruviel, meaning unbidden. Dark Vinruvel planted seeds of shadow in the Elder Gods, corrupting them and creating the first demons, with no understanding of what had been done to them. The corrupted Elder Gods battled endlessly to claim what their siblings possessed in what was called the God War, ravaging the earth. Set discovered that he could increase his own powers by eating his fellow Elder Gods, and he became the Earth's first murderer. However, the process caused him to degenerate into a demon. Most of the other Elder Gods, with the exception of Gaia, began to imitate him and became demons themselves to further their own strength, among them the Beast. Around this time, an Alpha Celestial, the progenitor, was mortally infected by the Horde and crashed down on Earth. The Celestial's diseased body fluid seeped into the Earth and percolated through the planet's primeval surface, forever altering the Earth's evolutionary trajectory. This process constituted the primordial cause that gave rise to the superhuman abnormalities present in many of Earth's inhabitants. The progenitor's corpse laid unmoved within the Arctic Circle, and its resting place became the bottom of the Arctic Ocean at the North Pole. The demon Mephisto, young in the form of a fly, witnessed this and took this opportunity to lay maggots. Horrified by the demons, Gaia called upon the Demiurge to produce her a savior that could wipe out the elder god demons, Atum. Absorbing the demon's powers into his own body, Atum became the Demogorge and wiped out almost all the demons, except Chthon and Set, who escaped to the flickering realms and the Serpent Sea. A scant few elder gods survived. Tiwaz left the earth to wander. Meanwhile, the Utgard Loki escaped to his own realm. Utgard, joined by Tyrannos, Kemur, Meged, and Nergal. Utgard Loki then created a gate and gave his sister Gaia the key, in case she would ever wish to release them. Another elder god, Oshtur, was off-planet when the purge occurred, and so she survived and sired Agamotto, who became the first sorcerer supreme. Oshtur and Gaia also made planes for themselves, the astral plane and Avalon, respectively. The two, Set and Chthon, set aside their differences to create the crossroads as neutral ground. Agreements were made between the four of them, including restrictions to direct interference to the other's activities. In the aftermath of the war, Omnipotent City was built by the Lords of the Dawn, the first elder gods, as a place of divine fellowship. There, treaties were signed, covenants were sworn that saved millions of lives, and gods were married. After Atum consumed the corrupted elder gods, he cast their energies from his body, seeding the heavens with god stuff that Gaia later used to help usher in a new generation of god pantheons. Venruvial watched the purge from her earthen womb and was glad of it. As new gods and demigods rose to replace the cult, she created life of her own, some more powerful than those born of the One above all, some brighter than he himself, beginning with her eldest child and her son Udru, who was created to directly challenge the One above all. The One looked down from his exalted seat, and seeing again creations that were not his own, namely Udru, he became enraged and ripped apart and disfigured Udru. The One above all set the earth back upon his path through blood and flame. Still, he could not find the cause of this corruption, and so Venruvial grew stronger, cleverer, and even bolder. Trying to stop the corruption, the One above all crafted a flaming spear with the power of 1,000 exploding suns and descended upon the earth. With a single whispered word, he rended the earth asunder, laying bare its deepest caverns and darkest secrets. Finding that, beneath the surface, the planet had become as a living corpse, teeming with all manner of terrifying, blasphemous life. Corruption now wove through the very bones of the earth, turning all the world to monsters. And they knew this celestial as their enemy. The One above all looked upon these abominations, who had claimed dominion of the earth, and saw Venruvial, now called the Mother of Horrors, in the darkness below, driving these creatures against him. With his burning spear, he cast the monsters aside, and raised his spear to kill her, but she lashed out and pierced his golden flesh, planting within him a single seed of corruption from which erupted what would become known as gamma radiation. The green flame transformed him into the One below all, God's opposite. While the One above all's only weapon was love, the One below all's only weapon was hate. As the One above all, he built as the One below all. He broke so that he could build anew. The knowledge that even he, the author of creation, was not so almighty, that he could not be corrupted, made him hate Mother Venruvial above all others. The green god of rage faced the legions of Mother's monstrous children, and he fell upon them, murdering all he found on the Requiem plain. And when the last of them lay still, he turned to Mother Venruvial. The One below all raised his head and roared such a roar that the fabric of creation ripped apart, creating a howling frozen void of space and time. Into the void he dragged Venruvial, and there he visited greater suffering upon her. But though she was so grievously wounded, the mother of horrors would not die, as corruption itself was without end. She begged him for death, asking that he eat her as the only way in which she could be destroyed. But the one below all's other self had written the laws of the universe, and he knew that to consume Vinruvial would be to give her purchase within his own flesh. In so powerful a form as the one below all, the mother of horrors would have the power to corrupt not just the earth, but all creation. The one below all reached into the very firmament of the universe, and from it crafted a mighty chain that could never be broken, and a door so heavy it could never be opened. With the unbreakable chain he staked and bound the mother of horrors, and with the impassable door he sealed her within the frozen void he had created. The one below all left the corpses of mother's children where they fell upon the Requiem plain as a warning to any who came seeking to free their mother. He struck their heads with their tormented voices still inside them and hung them on iron chains all around the impassable door, so that mother must hear her children's screams for all eternity, lamenting their mother's crimes, lamenting that they were even born. His terrible work complete, the flame of the one below all receded, and the golden form of the one above all returned. Yggdrasil, the world tree, sprouted an energy field that supported and connected adjoining dimensions. Yggdrasil was instrumental in the creation of the Asgardian gods. Tiwaz, the elder god, became first king of the Asgardians. He was succeeded by his son Bor after he bested him in combat, and his other son Njord left to found Vanaheim and sire the Vanir. Bor founded Asgard, but died when Loki traveled in time from the future and executed him. Bor's son Kol proclaimed himself all-father and ruler of Asgard, but his brothers Odin, Vili, and Ve opposed him. Facing Kol's madness, who attacked the mortals, Odin went to Yggdrasil and stabbed his eye as a sacrifice in exchange for wisdom, and it was revealed that Kol was corrupted. The path to follow was then revealed to him by the World Tree via prophecy. Along with his two brothers, Odin assaulted Kol's fortress. For 40 days and 40 nights, Kol and his worthy remained hidden in the palace while his brothers slaughtered their Draumar forces and eventually broke in. Facing Odin, Kol denied their brotherhood, claiming to be the serpent that will feast on the world. Odin recited the prophecy of the World Tree and then defeated his brother, projecting him away. Odin then slaughtered the people of Earth, which Asgardians called Asheim, raising and renaming it Midgard so that no god would ever live there again. Leading his armies, he destroyed the realm, assaulting the fortresses of the mortals and killing every single one of them. Billions of mortals tainted by the serpent's sickness. Odin was known then as the Usurper or the Destroyer. He erased the memory of his brother and became the Allfather, trying to rule with patience and compassion, unlike Kol, and trying to escape the World Tree prophecy. Odin's brothers later died facing the fire giant Surtur, and upon their sacrifice, their powers joined Odin's. The new pantheons created the Council of Godheads, a loose committee of their leaders designed to gather information and share consultation upon menaces or threats which no single pantheon of gods could handle alone. With the appearance of the pantheons, Gaia then merged with Earth itself and dedicated herself to guiding evolution as Mother Earth. Atom went to live in the sun. He became the progenitor of the Heliopolitan race of gods and was worshipped by the people of ancient Egypt as Ra. 3 billion years ago, Earth was visited by the Harvesters, a race of farmers that seeded worlds for later energy harvesting of its livestock. Using meteors, they rained parasites to merge with the cells, forming new organisms. Most of those parasites died, but others managed to spawn generations of hosts infected, finally merging together into a single creature. Those parasites eventually became known as mitochondria, the energy factory in all animal cells. Those developed, perfected into more and more complex forms, integrating within all life. The Harvesters, having insinuated their genetic code into all living cells on the planet at the dawn of life, patiently watched the evolution of life for millions of years until they decided to harvest their right crop. 2 billion years ago, the avian Shi'ar culture arose in Shandalar, embracing the art of war and commanding the largest empire in the known universe. On Earth, during the Proterozoic era, the mutant civilization of Treshold was created when a group of mutants from the modern age traveled back in time and used the seed containing the genetic materials of mutants who will perish in a massacre to birth the mutants in the waters. The Treshold became a thriving society governed by two houses, the enriched, referring to the mutants, and the enshrined, referring to baseline humans. However, they faced numerous enemies such as the Shi'ar, the unbreathing, and the living bacteria Archaea and Sublime they created as bioweapons that turned against them. Treshold eventually perished, leaving Okara and Silo as the only surviving Thresholders, with the former becoming the living island of Okara through their mutant gift, changing from an almost human form with small sprouts into a fully bark-covered form, and eventually an island. As mutant kind proved immune to Sublime, the bacteria attacked them by planting an irrational hatred and fear of mutants into humankind. But the bacteria took more direct actions in order to ensure that mutant population would be held in check, if not exterminated, in order to keep it from becoming the dominant species of the planet. Long after Threshold's disappearance, the bacteria Archaea and Sublime engaged in a microscopic battle to decide who would inherit the planet Earth and dictate the flow of life, with Sublime emerging victorious. Cast out into the abyss, Archaea traveled to alien worlds and evolved separately over the coming millennia. For billions of years, Sublime spread across the planet, flowing through the currents of existence, adapting, evolving, and spreading its influence among the myriad life forms that came to be. From the simplest single-celled organisms to the most complex creatures, it wove its unseen threads, whispering in the very essence of life itself. It watched as civilians rose and fell, as empires clashed and crumbled, all the while weaving its subtle web of influence, shaping the course of history from the shadows. 1 billion years ago, the One Above All again found himself forced to intervene when the first storm god, Hadad, grew so much in power he made the abstract entities his slaves. He confronted the evil god in the dimension of manifestations and swiftly took him down. Although defeated, Hadad wasn't killed and bid his time until he could reawaken and bring destruction once again with his fellow storm gods. 1 billion, or hundreds of millions of years ago, the Skrulls came to be in Skrullos, either descending from the ancient Zorians or created by the Builders. The Skrulls were visited by the Celestials during their first host, which created 3 distinct Skrull variants: the Prime Skrulls, with no inherent abilities but having the capacity for mutation, the nigh-powerful Skrullian Eternals, and the Skrullian Deviants. Yet another offshoot developed from the Skrulls, a race of black magic practitioners who became known as the Dire Wraiths, and soon departed Skrullos to inhabit the Dark Nebula and espouse plans for universal domination. In planet Hala, the Celestials experimented on the Kree race, creating the Kree Eternals and the Kree Deviants. At a separate time, a highly advanced race dedicated to scientific experimentation, known as the Progenitors, experimented on prehistoric Kree, engineering them by using the Primagen or Prima Materia. Their attempt at turning them into new beings resulted in the very first race of Inhumans, a type of superpowered mutants. Other notable alien culture was the Xandarians from Xandar, who, wary of the Shi'ar and other empires, created its defense with the universe's first space militia, the Nova Corps, overseen by the World Mind, a sentient supercomputer containing the accumulated knowledge of all Xandar. The Luminous tried to share the secrets of nuclear energy with the less advanced Prosilicans. They accepted the technological process, but their ethics were not advanced enough to use it wisely. They built nuclear-powered weapons and used them in war against each other and other planets in what was called the First War. In the final conflict, the luminous Emnu was forced to create the Ultimate Nullifier, a weapon that destroyed the Prosilican civilization as well as 90% of the universe. The Luminous swore to never meddle again in the fate of other species, no matter how tempting, changing their name to Watchers. Due to the toxic fallout from the war, the Watchers sealed off the devastated areas from the rest of the universe, creating the Barrens. The Prosilicans were sealed away as well, along with their planet, Prosilicus, and the Watchers relocated to planet T-37X, where they began guarding the apex of all reality, a gateway to the multiverse. Most of the Prosilicans were decimated, with the few surviving ones sealed in the Barrens, and as years went on, they began hatred towards the Watchers for destroying their civilization and causing their suffering. These Prosilicans reorganized into the Reckoning, a vast armada hell-bent on getting their revenge on the Watchers and restart the First War by supplying various aggressive alien races with stolen Watcher technology. The Reckoning also engaged with slavery as they forced powerful aliens to fight for them. One of these slaves was the Cormorant, who would later come to serve the Helmsman. Around this time, Galen of Ta, who had survived the end of the Sixth Cosmos and was drifting in a spaceship, was sighted by Essie, one of the Watchers, who drew it down to his planet for study. There, Essie learned that the being within it had power beyond comprehension and would eventually be forced to consume entire worlds to satiate his cosmic hunger for life-sustaining energy. Realizing the danger that the nascent Galactus posed to the cosmos, this Watcher considered destroying the entity, who was still vulnerable due to his metamorphic state, but instead decided to abide by the Watcher's oath of non-interference and let the nascent Galactus depart in his starship. Essie, however, feared that for eons, yet uncounted, he would regret the decision he had made that day. The nascent Galactus employed his vastly limitless strength and power and first placed the corpses of his fellow Ta'ans into a pod and sent it off into the universe, there to drift in endless flight. He then created a suit of armor to help him regulate his raging internal energies, then transformed the Ta'an starship into a kind of incubator where Galactus spent thousands upon thousands of years evolving into his current form. Galactus Incubator eventually crashed on the surface of Ego, the living planet, causing him pain as it began to drain his life force. Ego saved a time-displaced Silver Surfer from Null, and the Surfer repaid the favor by removing the incubator from him. The Surfer, knowing in advance what Galan would become, planned to destroy the being before his birth. However, Uatu the Watcher warned the Surfer that despite the destruction he would bring, Galactus would be important for the balance of the universe. The Surfer entered the incubator intent on absorbing Galactus' power cosmic in order to restore himself to his normal form as Norin Rad, and was confronted by Galan. The two of them talked, and eventually the Surfer decided to spare Galan, remove the incubator from Ego, and set it on a one-way course toward the planet Archeopia. The Archeopians themselves did not disturb the strange object, but years later, a marauding space fleet approaching Archeopia and thinking that Galactus' incubator was a weapon, attacked it. Galactus, with his metamorphosis complete, emerged from his incubator, and Archeopia became the first planet he devoured. The Archeopians would later be completely exterminated by Ego. Not a being in the absolute physical sense, Galactus was a force of nature, and because of it, each mind that viewed him struggled to perceive his unguessable force, viewing him as a different image they could comprehend. Although Galactus devoured worlds, his coming to each one functioned as a test, and those who passed the test were strengthened and made more worthy of the great fate which was the promised end of the universe. Those who failed totally and were forever wiped. Ultimately, Galactus served a purpose in the One Above All's grand design, as the will to live again of all he consumed would shape the new cosmos into something stronger, nobler, and closer to perfection. Over the following millennia, Galactus constructed for himself an immense home, the world ship that he named Ta-2 after his former homeworld, which completely engulfed the Archeopian solar system as a tribute to both said homeworld and to Archeopia, the first planet that he had ever consumed. Indeed, Ta-2 was so enormous that other planets soon orbited around it as if it were a sun. For several billion years, Galactus consumed only planets uninhabited by sentient lifeforms, Archeopia being the only exception, and centuries passed between his feedings. However, as eons passed, the intervals between his feedings decreased considerably in length, and Galactus found himself finally needing to consume worlds inhabited by sentient races only if he could find no other worlds possessing the energy that he needed to sustain himself in time. Galactus suppressed his sympathy for other intelligent beings who were similar in nature to the being from which he had been birthed, and thus, realizing himself to be a higher kind of being than they were due to his intrinsic role in the natural order, was willing to destroy their lives in order to continue his own. Moreover, he was also fully aware of the fact that he was destined to one day give back to the universe infinitely more than he would ever take from it. The first being Galactus, selected as his herald, was the Fallen One, so called because he quickly rebelled against Galactus. Galactus imprisoned the Fallen One in the Kiln, a prison placed at the edge of the universe, but this former herald later escaped from his imprisonment and began hunting him down over the millennia. As the proemial gods shepherded the young universe, life flourished and their place in the universe became diminished. Diableri would not have this, and desired to remake the universe in his own image. His dark ambition corrupted most of the other proemial gods, and a war broke out among them. Galactus got involved in the proemial gods' war, slaying Diableri, the instigator, and imprisoning the rest. Hidden away, the first firmament began its first tentative attacks against the seventh multiverse. When it sent its aspirants to invade the multiverse, the Beyonders placed concordance engines on Earth. These could alter reality, space, and time, grant wishes, and act as a gateway to the multiverse. Their purpose was to draw miracles to the planet and create the conditions for extraordinary heroes that might defend their realities from being destroyed by these death celestials. The first engines were spotted during the time of Pangea, so about 335 million years ago. 100 million years ago, the alien Anunnaki seeded Mars and its neighboring planet Tiamat with life. Advanced cultures existed on both planets, and the two cultures fought until Mars utterly destroyed Tiamat, its remains becoming the asteroid belt. During the war, the Abyss, a powerful dark entity slumbering in the side reality known as the Vanishing Point, who wanted to end the universe, influenced some Martians to create 3 crowns to channel the power of his dark children: the Crown of Tentacles, the Crown of Wolves, and the Thorned Crown. Under the influence of these crowns, the Martians tried to break their own world apart to awaken the Darkest Child, who would in turn awaken his brothers to free their nameless father from his prison. However, the Archons, a race of constructs created by the Watchers to guard the Abyss and wait for his eventual return, fought them and managed to thwart their plan at the cost of their own lives. The nearly destroyed planet was abandoned in the aftermath of the conflict, with the only Archon who managed to survive the ordeal remaining behind to guard the crowns. The builders entered the superflow, the informational space between universes, and spent 1,000,000 years constructing a structure of communications through what was called ascension stations. Each station scanned their universes for a world that was about to ascend on a universal scale and or enter the builder's artificial new universal structure. When it found one that was doing so, the station gave them a blessing, the white event, to produce shepherds for the change. It empowered individuals, turning them into night masks, star brands, justices, ciphers, and others. Heroes and protectors meant to let their people make technological and evolutionary leaps. With these new systems, the builders were called the outdated gardeners, and most of the Abyssi died. 66 or 65 million years ago, a moon made of Uru, metal from the first moon in the universe, was shattered during a battle between 2 elder gods, with one of the pieces eventually crashing to Nidavellir, one of the 10 realms, and being claimed by the dwarves. The dwarves bestowed this chunk of Uru to Odin as a gift after he saved their realm from an invasion of trolls. Sometime later, an unimaginably powerful cosmic storm called the God Tempest approached Asgard, and Odin battled the storm for many days to defend his kingdom. Once the storm was weakened enough, Odin defeated the God Tempest by trapping it in the chunk of Uru. From the Uru, he ordered the dwarves of Nidavellir, to forge Mjolnir. On the Godmaker Forge, the blacksmiths Eitri, Brock, and Buri needed to use the tremendous heat of a star to get the forge hot enough to manipulate the Uru. The hammer was completed in 17 weeks. In the process, the star exploded and almost took Midgard with it. After Mjolnir landed on Earth, Odin retrieved it. The creation of Mjolnir has been blamed for the extinction of the dinosaurs. Other reasons given for the extinction include the fact that the builders caused a white event to happen at the time. The star brand housed in the white event asteroid created a new star brand from a Tyrannosaurus Rex who defended Earth from threats such as the time-traveling Kree Empire. According to a different account, the extinction was the ultimate result of the Demiurge ending the threat of Set and his demonic elder gods. Alternatively, that which endures, a collective entity responsible for natural selection, decided dinosaurs were an evolutionary dead end and chose to focus on mammals. Alternatively, it was due to the Asgardian beast, Ratatoskr, killing all the dinosaurs. Alternatively, the meteor that caused the extinction event was the remains of a dead world, and it was made of diamonds that could grant time travel abilities. When Odin first tried to wield Mjolnir, he couldn't control it due to the god Tempest still retaining its power. The hammer devastated Asgard as it flew out of control. Out of spite, Odin cast an enchantment on the hammer to prevent anyone else from wielding it. The god Tempest purportedly died, but its power would remain inside Mjolnir. Not all dinosaurs were wiped out. Aliens called the Nuwali used advanced science to create a game preserve in Earth's Antarctic region. It was stocked with earthly life of the time, including early dinosaurs, and this secret savage land would remain untouched by Earth's transformations and evolutions over the next hundreds of millennia. 10 million, several million, 1 million, or hundreds of years ago, Hela was visited by the peaceful Skrulls, and they set about educating the natives to the point where they could join their trading empire. The Skrulls proposed a test to determine the worthier race between the Kree and the Kotati, another race living there. Taking members of both races to Earth's moon, they engineered an area of it to be breathable, calling it the Blue Area. The Skrulls created an arena and bid the two races to use the resources they had to create something of worth. After the Skrulls left, the Kree constructed a magnificent city known as the Blue City, where the Kotati created a beautiful garden. A year later, the Skrulls returned to judge the two races and found the Kotati's accomplishment the worthier. Enraged, the Kree killed the Skrulls and the Kotati and seized the Skrulls' starship. They used the ship to return to Hela, then set about deciphering the technology of the starship. The Kree eventually spread throughout the galaxy. Due to the immense distances between the galaxies, it took the Skrulls decades to learn of the Kree's treachery and atrocities, by which time the Kree had established their own interstellar empire, becoming bold enough to attack the Skrulls in the Andromeda galaxy. Thousands of years after the First War, Uatu the Watcher came across a situation that tested the vow of his people when he witnessed the Yurds disposing of atomic waste by jettisoning it into space, potentially threatening some other distant world with destruction. Uatu watched the mass of atomic waste for decades when one day he witnessed a supernova jettison a rogue planet into space. Uatu witnessed as the planet struck the cloud of atomic waste, destroying both. This reinforced in Uatu's mind that they should leave things to fate. Eventually, the Watchers assigned themselves onto the moons of various inhabited worlds to observe activities there. Uatu was assigned to the planet Earth and constructed a citadel on the blue area of Earth's moon. Not only did Uatu watch history on Earth, but also took an interest in viewing his chosen world in alternate universes. His initial intentions were also to find a reality where his people did not make their grave error. In the millennia that followed, the deviant of Armageddon, known as Tantalus, created by the rogue celestial known as the Tiamat, convinced the deviants of all other races to eliminate their prime and eternal counterparts, including those of the Skrull race. The deviant Skrulls went to war against the other offshoots of their race under the command of the warrior princess Sigurte, until the vast majority of the other Skrull races were exterminated. At the time, they believed that they had driven all of the other races to extinction, except for a single eternal Skrull named Klaben. When Sigurte's forces stormed the unworthy stronghold in the valley of the Isle, Klaben convinced Sigurte not to kill him, as doing so would ultimately mean the death of their race and their greater destiny. Klaben spoke of a destiny beyond the stars where the Skrull people would rule over all those who were inferior to them. Accepting this truth, Sigurte and Klaben were married and transcended into godhood. This became the foundation of the deviant Skrulls religion, the Book of Worlds, based on a manifest destiny over the entire universe. Sigurte and Klaben were worshipped as gods by the Skrulls, and over the centuries that followed, the religion endured. However, many of the Skrulls believed tales from the Book of Worlds to be myths, but devout followers endured over the ages. These devout worshippers formed a religion called the Dardivan sect. Over the centuries, the inhabitants of the worlds that were invaded by the Skrulls and the various pantheon gods of 978 other worlds were either killed or enslaved. Among those gods, Hadith, Omen Maker, Pathlighter, the god of the Quiga of Quolon, blessed of lifers of the Druff of Rias, and Sephiad, the righteous of the Edo Edea Swarm Collective, were co-opted and enslaved by the Skrullian gods. Statues commemorating their fall and assimilation into Skrull culture soon became much of the imagery used in Skrullian places of worship. One of the most powerful and longest living Skrulls was Nogor, who was the talisman of the Skrulls and a step below the gods themselves. Nogor was often present in the vicinity of Skrullian conflicts as a show of approval for the Skrullian gods. The Skrulls became capable of conducting an intergalactic war against the Kree, but due to the vast distances between the Skrull and Kree galaxies, the eons-old war continued without a permanent conclusion. The Skrulls developed an artifact to modify reality following the wishes of the user, calling it the Cosmic Cube, apparently created by forming a meta-singularity or gray hole. In reality, it was an opening to a dimension containing sentient energy created by the Beyonders. The Skrull Emperor took the cube and declared himself a god. He reigned for many years, but the cube had potential to become a sentient being itself. Through the years of use, the Emperor involuntarily imprinted some of his own traits upon the embryonic consciousness of the cube, and thus the cube began to develop his own personality. Since the Skrull Emperor was a megalomaniac madman, the cube mimicked that attribute. Acting on its own, it transformed and destroyed several star systems in the Skrulls' Andromeda galaxy. Upon reaching emotional maturity, it had destroyed civilizations in 2/3 of the inhabited worlds in the galaxy, and as a result, the Skrull Empire succumbed to barbarism, though the Skrulls would eventually reconstruct their empire centuries later. In response to the Cosmic Cube's existence, the Kree removed the brains of the greatest Kree minds upon their deaths and assimilated them into a supercomputer called the Supreme Intelligence in a process called supremarization. Eventually, the intelligence developed a mind of its own and refused to create a Cosmic Cube, knowing of its dangers. Despite this, it was allowed to continue to exist to serve the Kree with its wisdom. Its influence eventually grew to the point where it replaced the Kree government, and its worship became an organized religion. The Kree and the Skrulls separately tried to acquire the Crystal of Ultimate Vision, a legendary item said to grant ultimate power. However, their greed in wanting to acquire such power caused the crystal to find them and their peoples unfit, and so the Skrull and Kree evolutions became dormant. In order to overcome their genetic stagnation, the Kree searched through the universe's species to restart their evolution. Their experiments included inserting the potential to duplicate the abilities of other species, possibly using Kree blood in the process. One of the main steps in their experimentation was to recreate the pure and first catalyst of powers, the Primogen, used by the progenitors in the Kree's creation. Their attempts failed, though they resulted in the creation of superpowered mutant offshoots from all these races, called Universal Inhumans, which used less potent race-specific catalysts. 1,000,000 years ago, Lucifer the Morning Star led an army of angels to banish the demonic Engarai from Earth. After this, he led a rebellion against the Judeo-Christian god Yahweh, starting a war in his dimension, heaven. Lucifer was ultimately defeated after being sold out by the angel Zadkiel, whom he saw as a friend. Lucifer and his 14 lieutenant angels were cast down into hell, and 130 million angels were expelled from heaven. The fallen angels, or fallen, became known as demons and started a never-ending war against heaven. After this, the Garden of Eden was created. According to one account, this garden was created by Yahweh. According to another, it was created by Sis-Neg, the man who caused the Big Bang. In his way to traveling through time to the beginning of creation, it was also claimed the garden grew from the corpse of the star brand Tyrannosaurus rex, drawing in possible avatars it could transfer to. Regardless, the first man to be born there was named Adam, and his first wife was called Lilith. According to different contradictory accounts, Lilith was either a fallen angel or created by the same being who created Adam in Eden. Alternatively, Lilith's father was a Yazatas, a Zoroastrian deity. In Eden, Adam and Lilith produced many children collectively known as the Mazakim. In time, she found Adam's companionship oppressive and abandoned him. 3 purported angels murdered most of the Mazakim in response, and a grief-stricken Lilith fled to the demon cities under the Red Sea. Bitter towards humanity for her losses, Lilith vowed that they would suffer forever at the hands of her future children, and that her line would dominate. After Lilith's departure, the same being who created Adam spawned Eve to be his new wife. But the demon Mephisto tricked her into talking Adam into eating from the forbidden tree of knowledge of good and evil. After which, Yahweh condemned mankind to pain and sorrow and expelled the couple from Eden. Adam and Eve had children, Cain and Abel, but an unfortunate accident in adolescence resulted with Abel having a rock stuck in his head. Cain had descendants, known as Cain's clan, including the monsters Grendel and Big Mother. After his physical death, Adam was forced to stand guard over the primal matrix, the model on which the universes of the multiverse were structured, as both a reward and punishment for his actions in life. His body was forced to suffer the pain of every transgression of man against the Creator to occur since his own, and thus suffered from an incredibly scarred visage, which he chose to hide under a mask, taking the name Spyros. The caveman Vin wandered in search of the Garden of Eden, which he had seen in a dream. On the brink of death, Vin was saved by Burke, who lived in Eden alone, and the two became lovers. They lived together in peace until deviants attacked, seeking to kill them and claim the garden's power source for themselves. While Vin and Burke were able to defend the garden for a short while, the deviants triggered a cave-in and the two fell in a chasm deep below the garden. Burke was killed, but Vin survived and found the Star Brand. Vin absorbed its power and used it to defeat his assailants, razing the garden to the ground of the process, though he felt unworthy of the power and believed Burke had been meant to claim it. A small African tribe in what would later be known as Wakanda learned to manipulate storm clouds to funnel cosmic energies, creating a path that eventually pulled down vibranium meteorites. They crashed to the earth, leaving a large rock made from the mysterious metal. Mulsi, chief of the tribe, was the first to discover that the tribe's sacred mountain was in fact a vibranium meteor and unlocked the strange metal secrets, becoming the first to bear the title of the Black Panther. Elsewhere, a young caveman named Ghost became the last survivor of his tribe after a Wendigo killed them all, and accepted a deal with Mephisto in order to gain powers and claim vengeance, becoming the first spirit of vengeance and first Ghost Rider. Elsewhere, a group of humanoid aliens crash-landed in a pocket dimension. The ship's warp drive engine somehow created a permanent oscillating rift between the pocket dimension and Earth. They would appear atop a mountain in the Himalayas of Tibet. The 100 survivors created a city around the spaceship, Kunlun, using the ship's material and design to build the city. Unaware that the central hall, was the former interior of the spaceship. Kunlun was one of 7 cities that appeared on the earthly plane periodically. They would call themselves the 7 capital cities of heaven. Every 88 years, all these cities would align in a heavenly convergence, creating the place called the Heart of Heaven. The cities held a tournament, placing each of their champions, called the immortal weapons, against each other. The winning city would appear every 10 years rather than the normal 88 years. When Kunlun's excesses led people to the dark arts in search of greater hedonism, a man named Chang Ming opened a portal to another plane of existence, letting in a host of demonic creatures, the most horrifying of which was a great dragon named Xiao Lao, the Undying. With the dragon's help, Chang Ming was able to seize control of the city. Hope seemed lost until Xiao Lao was slain by a citizen named Quan Star, who cut out the dragon's heart. Enraged at this, Chang Ming banished Quan Star from the city, melted the dragon's heart, and placed it in a sacred cavern, which revived the dragon. Afterwards, a young man named Quan Yaozu stepped up to the challenge and approached the dragon's cavern unarmed. By defeating Xiao Lao, he gained a part of his power and the ability of the Iron Fist, a name which became traditional role in the city, their contribution to the 7 capital cities of heaven's immortal weapons. Quan Yaozu and the other immortal weapons cooperated to build the 8th city, a prison to house the monsters plaguing Kunlun. They rounded up all the demons and Chang Ming and banished them there. However, the monsters could open the seal, locking them in from the inside, so Quan Yaozu was forced to banish himself to the 8th city to prevent anyone from escaping. Quan was proud to have sacrificed himself for his city until, as the years passed, he realized ordinary citizens kept being exiled to the prison just for being political dissenters. Enraged, he took over the prison and overthrew Chang Ming, locking Chang in the jail that was originally meant for him and swapping their names, with Quan calling himself Chang Ming from now on and preparing to one day have revenge against Kunlun. After Quan disappeared, the Iron Fist became a woman named Fan Fei. In this era, the early human mutant known as Fire Hair became the avatar of the Phoenix Force and nearly razed the planet due to its destructive impulses. Realizing the danger that beings like her posed to the Earth, she began assembling a team of supernatural and mystically augmented individuals to protect the nascent humanity from both outside threats and itself, recruiting Odin. Together they recruited the Agamotto, the Black Panther, the Ghost Rider, the Iron Fist, and the Starbrand, becoming the first Avengers.